The celestial vanguard glided through the void, its crystalline hull refracting starlight in patterns that had mesmerized countless species across the galaxy. Commander Xylos stood on the bridge, 6 tentacle-like appendages manipulating the control surfaces with practiced precision. The ship represented the pinnacle of Neradian technology, a civilization that had mastered interstellar travel 10,000 years before. Anomaly detected, Commander, announced Science Officer Thriel, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with excitement. Bearing 227 Mark 38. It doesn't match any known signature in our database. Xylos shifted his sensory stalks toward the main view screen. Magnify. The image shifted, revealing a structure floating against the backdrop of stars. It was perfectly geometric, a massive cube with edges that seemed to both absorb and reflect light simultaneously. Its surface was smooth, featureless except for what appeared to be a single sealed entrance on one face. Size? Xylos demanded. Approximately 3 kilometers on each side. Thriel responded, her tendrils dancing across the sensor array. Material composition? Unknown. Our scans are being reflected or absorbed. I've never seen readings like these. Xylos felt a ripple of unease travel through his central nerve cluster. In 8 centuries of exploration, he had encountered technological marvels from dozens of ancient civilizations. None had blocked Neradian sensors so completely. Full stop, he ordered. Deploy sensor probes. Maximum dispersal pattern. The celestial vanguard released a swarm of autonomous drones, each equipped with the most sophisticated scanning technology the Neradian collective possessed. The probes surrounded the cube, bombarding it with every scanning frequency known to galactic science. 5 minutes later, they had nothing. "This is impossible," Thriel muttered, her skin shifting to a deep purple of frustration. The probes report complete signal absorption. No reflection, no penetration, not even quantum-level interaction. Origin? Xylos asked. Unknown. But Thriel hesitated, her color patterns shifting uncertainly. There is one strange reading. The structure's outer layer contains trace elements consistent with Earth-based alloys. The bridge fell silent. The humans. Of course it would be the humans. Humanity had been a paradox that confounded the galactic community for centuries. A relatively young species that had somehow leapfrogged millennia of technological development in just a few generations. Their rapid advancement had triggered fear, admiration, and intense curiosity across the galaxy. Then, 200 years ago, they had simply disappeared. Their colonies had been abandoned, their outposts dismantled, their fleets vanished. The prevailing theory was that they had achieved some technological singularity and transcended physical existence. Others believed they had destroyed themselves. A few fringe scholars suggested they had gone into hiding, preparing for some unknown future event. "Contact Central Command," Xylos ordered. "Inform them we've discovered what appears to be a human artifact. Request historical records and protocol guidelines." While waiting for a response, Xylos ordered his crew to establish a perimeter around the structure. The cube remained motionless, inert, revealing nothing of its purpose or function. The response from Central Command came 12 hours later. The Celestial Vanguard was to maintain position and await the arrival of a specialist team. Under no circumstances were they to attempt to interact with the structure beyond passive observation. "They're sending the archivists," Xylos informed his senior staff during their briefing, "and representatives from the Galactic Council." Chief Security Officer Malk, a heavily armored arthropoid, clicked his mandibles in concern. "The Council. This is an unprecedented response for a simple artifact discovery." "Human artifacts are never simple," replied Thriel. "Remember the disaster at Alpha Centauri? An entire research fleet lost because someone activated what they thought was a harmless human navigation buoy. For 3 days, they observed the cube in silence. Occasionally, the surface seemed to shimmer, catching starlight in ways that defied optical physics. Otherwise, it remained unchanged, a perfect enigma floating in the void. On the fourth day, the reinforcements arrived. The archivist vessel was first, sleek, austere, and ancient. The archivists were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, dedicated to preserving knowledge above all else. They had studied humans with particular intensity, collecting every scrap of information about the enigmatic species. Following them came 5 ships representing the major powers of the Galactic Council, the crystalline vessels of the Elysian Communion, the living ships of the Verdant Collective, the geometric constructs of the Silicon Consciousness, the plasmashid dreadnoughts of the Krell Imperium, and the phased matter explorers of the Kshoran Assembly. Xylos had never seen such a gathering of power outside the council chambers on Nexus Prime. The archivists transferred aboard first. Their leader, Archivist Primarch Gen, moved with deliberate slowness, his ancient body supported by a field of responsive energy. Behind him came his acolytes, each carrying artifacts of their trade: quantum computers, probability engines, and translation matrices. Commander Xylos. Gen's voice resonated directly in Xylos's mind, bypassing conventional sound. You have discovered something of profound significance. It's just a structure, Xylos responded, unsettled by the Primarch's intensity. Admittedly unusual, but it is a human vault, Gen interrupted. Only the third ever discovered. The significance of the statement took a moment to register. Xylos had heard rumors, of course, every spacefaring being had tales of impenetrable structures left behind by humanity, containing what? Weapons? Knowledge? The humans themselves. The previous 2, Xylos asked. Remained sealed, Gen replied. Despite the combined efforts of the Council for over a century, this discovery provides a new opportunity. Within hours, the combined fleet had established an advanced research perimeter around the vault. Each species contributed their unique technologies and perspectives to the effort. The Elysians deployed consciousness probes, attempting to sense any sapient presence within. The Verdant Collective released spores that could infiltrate the smallest molecular gaps. The Silicon Consciousness deployed quantum computers to analyze the structure's mathematical properties. The Krell bombarded it with precisely calibrated energy beams. The Kshorans attempted to phase shift into the structure's interior dimensions. Nothing worked. It's responding, Thriel reported suddenly, 3 days into the combined effort. Look at the surface patterns. Xylos turned to the main viewer. The previously smooth surface of the vault now displayed subtle geometric patterns, lines and angles that seemed to shift and flow across its surface like liquid mathematics. It's a language, declared one of the archivist acolytes, a linguistics specialist named Than. But unlike any human communication system we've cataloged, the patterns grew more complex by the hour. Soon, the entire surface of the vault was covered in shifting, flowing symbols. Teams of linguists and cryptographers worked frantically to decipher them. It's not just a language, Than announced after 2 days of continuous analysis. It's a challenge. Explain, demanded the Krell representative, General Vor, his armored exoskeleton clanking as he leaned forward. The patterns are puzzles, Than explained. Mathematical, logical, conceptual. They're testing us. Testing for what? Asked Xylos. Intelligence, replied Gen. Ethical reasoning. Creativity. The patterns match theoretical models of human psychological assessment protocols. General Vor slammed a clawed appendage onto the conference table. The Krell Imperium does not take tests. We take what we want. Prepare the phase disruptors. Despite objections from the archivists, the Krell deployed their most advanced weapons system, a device capable of disrupting the molecular bonds of any known material. The energy beam struck the vault's surface and vanished completely. No reflection, no dispersion, simply absorbed as though it had never existed. Impossible, growled Vor. Try again, suggested the representative from the Silicon Consciousness, a hovering crystalline matrix named Interface 7. Our analysis suggests the vault's defensive capabilities may adapt based on perceived threat levels. The second attempt ended more dramatically. As the phase disruptor powered up, a pulse of energy emerged from the vault's surface. It wasn't a destructive blast. Rather, it carried information. The Krell weapon simply shut down, its operating systems rewritten at a fundamental level. It hacked our systems, Vor snarled in disbelief, through a directed energy beam. The vault's surface patterns changed again, flowing more rapidly now. A new symbol appeared on the face containing the sealed entrance, a simplified representation of a human hand. It wants direct contact, Fan suggested, a physical interface. After much debate, a volunteer was selected, a verdant named Allura, whose neural pathways were uniquely adaptable to foreign information patterns. Protected by every shielding technology the combined fleet could provide, she approached the vault in a small shuttle. As she extended her appendage toward the symbol, the vault's surface rippled. The patterns flowed toward her touch, converging like water finding its level. The moment contact was made, every communication system in the fleet activated simultaneously. A single message, repeated in each species' native language. "You are not ready. Return when you understand why." Allura was retrieved safely, though in a state of profound shock. The neural pathways in her sensory appendage had been completely reorganized, not damaged, but restructured in patterns that their best xenobiologists couldn't comprehend. And on the vault's surface, a countdown appeared. 24 hours, expressed in the universal mathematical standard adopted by the Galactic Council. "Until what?" asked Silos. "I believe," said Jen slowly, "we are being asked to leave." The debate that followed was heated. The Krell wanted to deploy their entire battle fleet. The Elysians suggested a psychic assault to breach the vault's consciousness. The Silicon consciousness proposed a targeted singularity to break through the physical barrier. In the end, it was a junior archivist who silenced the room. "What if we're missing the point?" she asked. "The message said we're not ready, not that we're forbidden. Perhaps the test isn't how to break in, but understanding why we shouldn't try." As the countdown reached its final hours, the vault's surface began to emit radiation across the electromagnetic spectrum. Not harmful, but increasingly intense. The message was clear: stay and face consequences, or retreat and consider the lesson. The Galactic Council representatives voted to withdraw, with only the Krell objecting. As the fleet prepared to depart, Skylos took one final look at the enigmatic structure. "What do you think is inside?" he asked Thriel. She dimmed her bioluminescence thoughtfully. "Whatever it is, the humans decided it was worth protecting from a galaxy that wasn't ready for it. Perhaps the greater wisdom is in accepting that judgment." As the celestial vanguard engaged its drive systems, Silos couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't failed a test. They had merely encountered the first question of many. And somewhere, watching and waiting, the architects of the vault were evaluating their response. The countdown reached 0 just as the fleet cleared the designated safety perimeter. The vault remained, silent and inscrutable, humanity's enigmatic legacy continuing its patient vigil among the stars. One standard galactic year after the first encounter with the human vault, a new fleet assembled at the coordinates. This time, it wasn't just an exploratory mission or a hasty response to an unexpected discovery. This was the full scientific and military might of the Galactic Council, 57 vessels representing 23 species, carrying the most advanced technology the galaxy had to offer. At the center of the formation hovered the Nexus Ascendant, a massive research platform specifically constructed for this mission. Its central chamber housed the Grand Conclave, representatives from every major power, gathered to witness what many believed would be a historic breakthrough. "The previous approach was flawed," announced Magistrate Corvin of the Elysian Communion, his ethereal form shimmering with barely contained anticipation. "We approached the vault as conquerors, not as scholars." General Vor of the Krell sneered, mandibles clicking with derision. And what has your scholarly approach yielded in the past year? Nothing. The vault remains sealed. Not nothing, corrected archivist Primarch Gen, his ancient voice silencing the gathering. We have studied the records of the previous 2 human vaults. We have analyzed every known piece of human technology. We have prepared. On the central holographic display, the vault floated serenely in space, its surface now completely dormant. The flowing patterns gone, returned to its original featureless state after the fleet's departure a year earlier. The key insight, continued Gen, came from studying human psychological patterns. Humans were unique among sentient species in their approach to knowledge protection. They did not simply guard their secrets. They challenged others to earn them. A game, snorted Vor. They turned galactic security into a game. Not a game, corrected Interface 7 of the Silicon Consciousness. A test of worthiness. Our historical analysis suggests humans believe certain technologies should only be accessible to those who possessed the wisdom to use them responsibly. The first approach to the vault was methodical. Rather than invasive scans or weapons, the fleet deployed a specialized communication array designed to broadcast on frequencies and in patterns that ancient human systems were known to recognize. For 3 days, they transmitted mathematical sequences, philosophical concepts, and symbolic representations of peaceful intent. The vault remained silent, its surface unresponsive. This is pointless, Vor growled on the 4th day. Let us deploy the new phase disruptors. Patience, counseled Gen. Remember what happened last time. On the 5th day, something changed. A small portion of the vault's surface began to shimmer, geometric patterns forming and dissolving in slow waves. Analysis suggested the patterns were forming in response to specific transmissions, particularly those containing ethical paradoxes and philosophical inquiries. It's evaluating our thought processes, suggested Than, now elevated to chief linguist of the archivist contingent. Not our technology. A new transmission protocol was established, focusing on conveying the ethical and philosophical development of the assembled species since humanity's disappearance. Historical conflicts and their resolutions, scientific discoveries and how they have been applied, cultural exchanges and cooperative achievements. Slowly, the patterns on the vault's surface spread, covering more area, becoming more complex. After 2 weeks of continuous dialogue, the patterns converged on the face with the sealed entrance, forming a new symbol, a spiral that many recognized as an ancient human representation of evolution and growth. Progress, declared Gen. The vault is acknowledging our development. But not opening, Vor pointed out. Words have failed. It is time for action. Despite objections, the Krell deployed their new technology, a field generator that could theoretically create a localized pocket of altered physical laws, where molecular bonds would behave according to programmed parameters. In essence, it could make solid matter temporarily permeable. The device activated, its energy field washing over a small section of the vault's surface. For a moment, it seemed to work. The surface rippled, becoming slightly translucent. Then, abruptly, the field inverted. Instead of altering the vault, it altered the space around the Krell vessel, encasing it in a perfect bubble of distorted physics. The ship wasn't damaged, just completely isolated, unable to affect or be affected by the space around it. After precisely 1 hour, the bubble dissolved, releasing the ship unharmed, but with all its systems temporarily disabled. Another lesson, observed Interface 7. The vault does not respond to force with force. It responds with containment and neutralization. The symbol on the vault's entrance shifted again, forming a series of interconnected circles. Unity, translated Than. It's asking for cooperation. After lengthy debate, a new approach was devised. Representatives from each species would contribute their unique perspective to a unified message, not just words or mathematics, but art, music, and symbolic representations of their shared history and aspirations. The composite message was transmitted directly to the vault's entrance. This time, The response was immediate and unexpected. The symbol expanded, flowing outward to cover the entire surface of the vault. Then, slowly, it began to pulse with light, not harsh or threatening, but gentle, almost inviting. "Something's happening," reported a sensor technician. "The vault is emitting radiation consistent with a dimensional fold." A small aperture formed on the entrance face, not opening into the vault itself, but seeming to bend space around it, creating a tunnel of distorted reality that led to somewhere else. "It's a gateway," breathed Than. "But to where?" After careful consideration, a probe was sent through the aperture. The telemetry it returned was confusing. It showed what appeared to be an identical space to the one they currently occupied, with the same fleet in the same formation, but with subtle differences. The stars were in slightly different positions. The ships showed minor variations in configuration. A parallel reality, suggested Interface 7, or a simulation of one. 3 days of analysis yielded a startling theory. The aperture wasn't just a door to another place. It was a gateway to another possibility, a reality where certain historical events had unfolded differently. "The humans didn't just disappear," Jen proposed, his ancient voice trembling with the enormity of the realization. "They branched. They created pathways to alternate realities and distributed themselves across them." "Why?" asked Xylos, who had remained with the expedition as a primary witness to the first contact. "Survival," replied Jen. "The ultimate insurance against extinction. If humanity faced a threat in one reality, they would continue in others." The implications were staggering. If true, it meant humans hadn't transcended physical existence or destroyed themselves. They had multiplied it, becoming a meta-civilization existing across a spectrum of possible realities. And the vaults were the nexus points connecting these realities. "We must go through," declared Vor, predictably. "This technology would make the Krell invincible." "That attitude," said a new voice, "is precisely why you cannot pass." The communication came from everywhere and nowhere, manifesting directly in the minds of everyone present. It carried an unmistakable signature that the oldest archivists recognized immediately. "Human. The vaults are not weapons or technologies to be claimed," the voice continued. "They are waypoints in a journey that your civilizations have not yet begun." On the central display, the aperture widened, revealing not another dimension but a figure, humanoid, but clearly evolved beyond the ancient records of humanity. Its form was both physical and energy, matter and information intertwined in ways that defied conventional biology. "We did not abandon the galaxy," the entity explained. "We expanded our definition of existence. The vaults remain as bridges, waiting for the day when other species are ready to join us in understanding the true nature of reality." "And how will we know when we are ready?" asked Jen. "When you stop trying to breach the vaults and start asking why they exist," the entity replied. "When you recognize that knowledge without wisdom is more dangerous than ignorance." Throughout the fleet, systems began receiving data, not comprehensive technology or scientific formulae, but philosophical frameworks and conceptual models that hinted at the path humanity had taken. "This is a beginning," the entity said, "a first step in a dialogue that may take centuries or millennia to complete. The vaults will remain, and with them, the invitation to evolve beyond your current understanding." "But what about immediate threats?" demanded Vor. "The entropic tide approaches from the galactic rim. The predictions give us less than 3 centuries before it reaches Council space." "We are aware," the entity acknowledged. "That knowledge is contained in the data we have provided. Study it carefully. The solution does not lie in weapons or shields, but in understanding the nature of entropy itself." Before more questions could be asked, the aperture began to close. The entity's form dissolved, returning to whatever state of existence it inhabited beyond conventional spacetime. "Wait," called Xylos, surprising himself with his boldness. "Will we see you again?" The response came as the aperture sealed, a final thought imprinted in their minds. "We never left. We have been here, in the spaces between your understanding, watching and waiting. The question is not whether you will see us, but whether you will become capable of recognizing what has always been present. The vault's surface returned to its dormant state, the patterns fading until only the smooth, featureless cube remained. But it had changed, or perhaps the observers had changed. What had seemed like an impenetrable barrier now felt like a door, waiting for them to grow into beings worthy of opening it. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council established a permanent research outpost near the vault, not to breach it or claim its secrets, but to study the philosophical and conceptual frameworks the humans had shared, to learn, to grow, to prepare. 5 years later, Xylos returned to the vault as part of a routine diplomatic rotation. The massive fleet was gone, replaced by a modest research station staffed by scholars from across the galaxy. The competitive tension between species had given way to collaborative study and contemplation. Standing in the observation dome, Xylos gazed at the vault floating serenely in space. Occasionally, its surface would shimmer slightly, acknowledging the presence of the watchers. "Have you made any progress?" he asked the station director, a young archivist named Leary. "That depends on how you define progress," she replied. "We haven't opened the vault, if that's what you're asking, but we've begun to understand why we shouldn't. At least, not yet." And the information they shared about the entropic tide. Leary's expression brightened. "That's been the most fascinating area of study. The human conceptual model suggested an entirely new approach to entropy, not as an enemy to be fought, but as a fundamental force to be channeled and redirected. The Verdant Collective has already developed prototype systems based on these principles." Xylos turned back to the vault, considering its silent presence. "Do you think we'll ever be ready to join them? I mean, some of us, perhaps," Leary said. "But I've come to believe that's not the point. The journey toward understanding is itself the purpose. The humans didn't leave these vaults as prizes to be claimed, but as mirrors in which we might see ourselves more clearly." As if in response to her words, a subtle pattern appeared briefly on the vault's surface, a spiral expanding outward. Growth, evolution, possibility. "They're still watching," Xylos observed. "Always," agreed Leary. "The question is whether we're learning to see." Throughout the galaxy, the story of the human vault spread, inspiring a renaissance of philosophical and ethical inquiry. Species that had focused primarily on technological advancement began to consider the wisdom that should accompany such progress. Ancient rivalries gave way to cooperative ventures aimed at addressing existential challenges like the approaching entropic tide. And somewhere, in the spaces between conventional reality, the beings that humanity had become watched with patient optimism. The vault stood as their legacy and their invitation, not barriers to be breached, but thresholds to be crossed when the time was right. The journey had begun. The understanding was growing. And in the vastness of cosmic time, what were a few more centuries of preparation before the next step in galactic evolution?